Luke Fox, NHL on Sportsnet joins me now. What's up, brother? How are we doing? You have a good holiday? You have a good break?
I did, yeah.
Good man.
Yeah, it's really nice, actually, that there's 3 days where you know there's going to be no games, no news whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was refreshing.
Yeah, I love that, though. That sounded so sad. We're like, 3 whole days. You're like Charlie from the chocolate factory breaking up his chocolate bar and saving it over the entire year. Like, I got a whole chocolate bar for an entire year. So lucky. Anyway, we're back. So I'm going to start with this. We're at the halfway mark, so we got to ask the stock and standard question of like, I'm not doing grades this time. I did that at the quarter mark. I upset Mike Fuda. He was not happy with my grades. So I'm not doing, yeah.
What did you say?
He wasn't happy that I said, I compared each kid to a type of student. And I had said that Max Domi was the kid who has potential, but is not doing it, that he was out back, behind the portables smoking weed. And he didn't like that. He was like, don't say smoke weed. And I was like, all right, I'll give everybody a higher grade this time around. And you know what? This is such a weird one because we're at the midway mark, and so many of the Leafs' numbers 5-on-5 are not terrific. The goaltending has been good. It's not explaining, I think, the entire picture of why they've been able to win these close games. I do think that there is something about them now that has matured and developed, and part of that is coaching, where I have more confidence in them when it gets late and they do protect a lead. The numbers are kind of funny when it comes to 5-on-5 when they're tied. They're actually quite bad. They somehow get worse. But, so far, midway mark, biggest surprise, and then we'll do biggest disappointment.
The biggest surprise is the goaltending, I'd say. The number one in the East, number 3 overall in terms of team save percentage. And it was one of the biggest question marks I had coming into the season, not because anyone thought Anthony Stolarz or Joseph Woll weren't good at tending the net. It was just, can they handle the workload? Neither one had appeared in even 30 games in any of their seasons. So it was like, are they going to stay healthy? Are these guys who have basically been number 2s, is one of them going to emerge as a 1? Are they going to be able to play enough? And they've both gotten hurt, but it's been at different times. And Stolarz has been just unbelievable. And Joseph Woll's numbers are stellar too. Mm-hmm. He had a little bit of a dip there, but he's bounced back over the last week and won a bunch more games. And even Hildebrand and Murray, they haven't been fantastic by any means, but neither has a losing record. So part of the credit for sure goes to a defense that is blocking more shots, that is pinching less, that is helping out their goalies. But you talk to the players, they just sound really confident in these guys, and they're getting fantastic goaltending. And it's like, when was the last time the Leafs have had the better goaltending in a playoff series? It happened once in the whole Matthews, Marner, Nylander era. And that was Samsonov over Vasilevsky, who was suddenly
which is so crazy.
Human. Yeah, which is crazy. But the one time they actually had the better goalie in a playoff series, they won the series. So this is a really encouraging thing. You just cross your fingers about Stolarz that, he gets back skating again and kind of snaps back into form after this knee operation.
So I agree with you to an extent on this one, because I didn't think the level would be this from both guys. But why I would say I'm a little less surprised than what my choice would be is I really believed in Joe Woll. I didn't love the contract extension just because of the health. Like, I thought, hey, on a balance of probability, that's always the way I am with contracts. It's not like, oh, do I think that something is going to be a horrible number? No, but I just thought, okay, let him show you that he can stay healthy and handle the workload, and then how much different is the contract going to be versus the other way around? But I always believed in the talent. There were way too many people that were either former goalies or, Kevin Woodley types, Steve Valiquette types, the pure evaluators of the position that were like, no, this is a hit. Like, you're not missing on this guy if he stays healthy. So I really did believe that he could be an elite guy in the leagues. The Stolarz thing is definitely a huge surprise in terms of how great he's been. But my pick for this is going to be John Tavares. That he's a point-a-game player. He's a point-a-game player. They took the captaincy from him, and I theorized that it would actually help with his popularity to a degree because it would take some of the pressure off, and people would view that symbolic gesture even as a very humble move by a guy who was always stated to lead by example. But I didn't think that it was going to kind of flip to this, so he's a point-a-game player, right? And he's played 40 games. But he's also leading or tied for the lead amongst all Canadian forwards when it comes to game-winning goals so far this season. So he's been incredibly clutch. In the absence of Matthews, he has had difficult matchups and still put up those numbers. He was absolutely snubbed from Team Canada. And yeah, I don't mind that he's not going, and I understand the decision-making process. But you look at some of those guys in terms of production, like what Sam Bennett has done over the last month, and go, boy, this one's probably going to get brought up if Canada struggles to score the way that the junior team did, right? We just had kind of a dry run when it comes to this. And all of a sudden, you have Leaf fans talking about this guy. I think before the year started, maybe you disagree with this, that a lot of Leaf fans would have been like, hey, if he wants anything over a certain number, we're happy with him walking. In fact, we would be thrilled with the idea that he's gone from this organization to now someone who is probably going to get around 6.5 a year, and fans are going to be thrilled with the idea of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great guy to bring up. I'm less surprised. I think just because I talk to this guy multiple times a week, and the speech he gave at the opening of training camp, the way he dealt with the captaincy transition, call it what you want, it was taken from him. And there was a determination I sensed in him that he was going to stick it to the doubters. And even back then, he was talking about how he wanted to be on that Four Nations team. I think, even though his age is working against him, I think he still wants to go to Italy and represent Team Canada. That was a big reason. Of all the Leafs who got eliminated after that, got their hearts crushed in round one, game 7, Pasternak, he's the only one that said, I want to play more hockey. I'm flying overseas. I'm going to wear the C for Canada. And yeah, the World Championships didn't go well, but this guy, he just loves the game. And I think he really wants to fight Father Time to the death. And good on him. He has had a fantastic season, and particularly in that first stretch where Matthews was out, I thought he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it really, I know Matthews comes back and he immediately goes back with Marner, but I hope that stretch put the idea in Berube's head that maybe, if things aren't going well in a playoff series, maybe we separate Matthews and Marner, because Tavares really does play his best hockey, I think, when he's with Mitch.
Yeah. Here's the other part of it too. He needs 10 goals to match what he had all season last year. And we're, again, 40 games in the season for him. So at the halfway mark, he's already far surpassed what he did there. And so, yeah, I love the attitude. I love the approach. I'm not surprised, I guess, by the mentality stuff that you're talking about there. But, yeah, for someone who's, how old is he now, 34? Yeah, I think he's 34.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, for someone
who's 34. He's doing it more 5-on-5 than power play. He's getting accused of being a power play merchant. He's doing it 5-on-5 this year.
Yeah, no, he's been solid 5-on-5. I haven't seen the power play merchant stuff. But yeah, that's my biggest surprise. Okay, biggest disappointment time.
Biggest disappointment? To me, it's the secondary scoring, the offense in general. Whether it's 5-on-5 or power play. You look at that talent. How is this not a top 5 or at least top 10 power play in the league?
Yeah.
So they're middle of the pack power play. That's a massive disappointment. And then 5-on-5 scoring isn't that great either. And this, despite Marner being on pace for a career year in points, Nylander, despite his recent dip, being on a career year for goals, Auston Matthews being over point a game whenever he's healthy, Tavares we just talked about, he's exceeding expectations. So all the guys you hope to deliver are delivering, and yet you're a mediocre offensive team. So what's the problem? Max Domi has picked it up lately, but he got off to a horrid start offensively. Nick Robertson, lots of hype over the camp again, but just hasn't lived up to his own expectations. Matthew, can't blame Matthew Nice. He's taken a giant step. He's been fantastic, but I don't know. They lost Bertuzzi. They've had injuries. Pacioretty's been out for a while, but they're getting hardly anything from the blue line up until this weekend.
Yep.
They just don't have a second wave, and you're still just depending on the four guys basically for all your offense.
Yeah,
you'd like to think the power play is going to pick up though in the second half.
But how many times have we said that?
Yeah.
That's the thing that is and again, they've had regular seasons where they've been far better than what they've shown so far this year, right? Like they finished top 5 on power play percentage in seasons past, and then it's dried up come postseason time. So you're a little bit more forgiving of that. But it still weirdly has always felt that despite this collection of talent, despite these guys all having worked well together 5-on-5 from a scoring chances and scoring ability, the power play just gets stuck in mud sometimes with these guys. Like this collection of 5 guys, for whatever reason, despite all the talent in the world, just can't seem to click consistently on that power play. Or they just can't go without their large lulls of us talking about what exactly it is. And they've tried, Mark Tavares tried to be creative in terms of putting different guys out there, and they've capitulated to William Nylander in terms of trying to get him more ice time and leaving him out there for extra stuff. And yeah, I know they didn't have Matthews, but that's when the power play was also at its best this season. So it's hard to make that.
Head scratcher.
Yeah, it's hard to make it as a big excuse for it. But yeah, I'm with you. That the power play's 18th, man. It's almost like it's right beside the Calgary Flames and the Nashville Predators, who are not exactly the envy of the NHL right now. So yeah, I think that's got to be a big second half improvement. I think that one gets a little bit more grace just from the standpoint of what you said, which is you always rely on the idea that, okay, at some point they're going to heat up, they're going to get hot, and how much of this is snake bit versus anything. And I don't know. It's a tougher one to suss out. Mine is I'm going to go with one player directly, and that's Nick Robertson. It's not this seems really harsh because you're going like, really? The guy who was a fringe roster player is your biggest disappointment? Yeah, but simply because it was like, the smoke of the offseason, the discussion of like, hey, he's going to get traded, the whole, second start, second chance, the running out there yet again of this player. And for what exactly? For 6 goals over 34 games, a guy who still struggles to stay on his feet, a guy who the other night was basically benched, had a shift skip by Craig Berube in a game that has kind of been a hallmark for his success in years past, which is like a back-to-back against Philly. Not exactly the most stout team when it comes to keeping the puck out of their net. I haven't seen anything really about this guy's progression. I've just seen basically the same old thing. And at this point, like, again, the argument has remained the same, which is, well, he makes $800K. So what are you going to do? And I'm like, all right, well, eventually that just can't be good enough for a team, and I just don't think it's good enough for the Leafs. And I think all of the pressure that was coming into this year and all the eyeballs that were on him and my belief after the preseason, so maybe I'm disappointed myself for believing there was going to be a step after yet another hot preseason, because I've done this twice now. The fact that he was compared to Max Pacioretty in terms of who would be more valuable by me, I got to at least weigh that into this decision. And so for me, it's him. It's the goal scorer who doesn't score.
It's hard for me to see him in the lineup in game 1 just because of
impossible.
Who is the coach, his size. He's been in and out, even when some games when the Leafs have been very unhealthy and they have call-ups up and they've played over him at times. I think Berube is like the combination of McMahon, Domi, and Robertson, but I think really he's like the combination of McMahon and Domi most of all. And Robertson, some more scratches are coming his way. The whole thing to me seems like an ill fit. And it's not that he's not an NHL player. I just think eventually he's going to be wearing a different sweater.
Yeah. I actually hope for his sake that it does happen this season, because I really do believe that if I was him, I'd be exhausted with this at this point. And I'd be trying to just recalibrate to thinking I need a fresh start somewhere else where there isn't a perception of me, where I can go in without any pressure and just go play. Because, yeah, it's just not working here, man. And if even with that line that has shown some flashes as of late and where he was able to accumulate a bunch of his 6 goals, they've been getting caved in 5-on-5 lately. I think the last 4 or 5 games, it's been a extremely ugly picture for them. By far the worst on the team than any other line. Okay, let's move on. McCabe gets a puck to the head, misses 9 days, 10 days, more?
11.
11.
Yeah, 10, 11, yeah.
Okay, so he takes a puck to the head, and seemingly at the time it was it's not a big deal, but then the Leafs did their day-to-day thing, and he missed 11 days, and you're like, oh, that's probably not a good one. Now, I think he gets the concussion from hitting his head off the ice, and they haven't said concussion. They're saying upper body injury, but we all know what it is. We saw him take a concussion.
Yeah. It was, you know what? When
Scary.
You see it in person, it makes you sick to your stomach, too. Like when you're in the building, you see a guy try to get up and fall like
Awful.
that. It's
No, truly awful. It's one of the only things about sports that I can't stand is seeing the injuries, and especially the ones with the head because, they're harder to prognosticate. They're harder to project in terms of when you're going to be right. They've got the long-term consequences that are scary for people. But I thought that we can't really project when he's going to be back. I know he was put on IR, so it's 10 days? How does I'm so bad with this stuff.
A week. So,
a week.
Yeah, he's going to miss the next 3 games minimum. But it could be longer. Yeah.
I would guess that after your second concussion in a month that you miss more than a week. But who knows? I'm not going to play, Twitter, radio, podcast, doctor, whatever you want to call it. But I thought that the quote from Berube was interesting, and I think you did too because you posted it and you put it out in an article. But the quote is, quote, "I didn't like it. He's sticking up for his team and his teammates. We really appreciate that, but I don't like seeing it happen." End quote. Was your interpretation of that he doesn't like seeing McCabe fight, period, or that he didn't like what Hathaway did? What was the way you interpreted it? Because I took it as he doesn't like to see him fight.
I don't think he liked to see him fight that guy in that situation.
Yeah.
It was behind the play. It's a nothing, whatever, January game against the Flyers. Hathaway's a real puncher, and he's probably going to face Ryan Reeves tonight, I would imagine. And I know he kind of clips Hildeby, but it didn't seem over the top egregious.
Agree.
I like that. And then, we want the Leafs to stick up for each other, right? We don't want the Timothy Liljegren in Boston and everyone turns the other cheek. And then they have to have a big meeting about, oh, hey guys, we're a hockey team. We need to stick up for each other. And I love that the heart McCabe showed, okay, go have a chat with Hathaway. You have him down, but then to let him get up and actually drop the gloves. And it was a fight that McCabe picked, right?
Mm-hmm.
He kind of initiated it.
Not kind of. He did.
Well, he did. Yeah, he did.
He did. You do that. You take multiple shots at a guy with cross checks while he's down on the ice. He's going to get up and fight you.
Yes. So I don't know. It became a bigger thing than it needed to be. And that was my interpretation from Berube. And it's a fine line, right? Because he also wants guys to stick up for each other, and he loves that. He always talks about guys being good teammates, and the whole band of brothers thing. Berube loves that stuff, but it feels like a little bit of pick your spots or do it in a bit of a smarter way, especially since you've just had a head injury. I mean, it's a fast game, heat of the moment. I'm sure McCabe's not weighing all that in the thing. He just says, this guy touched my goalie. I'm going to go have a conversation with him.
Which I get, but the follow-up the follow-up question to this is, do you get the sense that on a team where obviously they do preach sticking up for one another, for a group that has been lambasted at times for not doing it, that there is going to be a little bit of a discussion with McCabe of, hey, we love the tenacity that you play with. We love the way that you stick up for teammates, but you're one of the most important guys on the team, and we can't lose you to injury. We can't lose you for 5 minutes for a fight.
He's so important now.
Yeah.
That is one of the best shutdown pairs in hockey right now. Mm-hmm. Right?
I said he's one of the 6 most important skaters on the team. I now have him above Morgan Riley in terms of guy you cannot lose to injury going into the postseason. Taking goaltenders out of it, he's the top 6 skater.
He's probably harder to replace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Riley, you could have OEL on the power play, and it'd probably be about the same. So
yeah, I would guess.
He really is an important guy, and he's behind the scenes. I know he doesn't wear a letter, but guys look up to him. He's become a leader in that room too.
Mm-hmm.
He goes about business in a different way, right? Like Tanev, I think, is a better defenseman, but he doesn't do it physically. He does it more with his stick and his shot blocking, and just the pairing of those, they really complement each other in terms of not just lefty righty, but their style in how they defend is a little bit different. And so it's this two-headed monster that on most nights limits or completely shuts down the other team's best line. Those two guys, even though they have hardly any offense between the two of them, they lead the Leafs in plus minus. Those two. And I know, plus minus is a flawed stat, but that tells you something about just how good they are at defending. They start most of their shifts in their own zone. They kill the penalties. Like that duo is incredibly valuable, especially come playoff time. So you just cross your fingers and hope that he gets better soon. Like 2 head injuries in 35 days, whatever it is frightening.
He very much reminds me of Jake Muzzin in the sense of the Leafs don't have that guy who's a vocal leader in the dressing room, who is a thumper, right? Like the team, as much as they are like a more physical team, a shot blocking team, go on down the line, like how many guys actually lay the body on the team like he does, right? Nyes likes to hit. There's no question. Yeah. It's very different.
Benoit.
Yep. Benoit showcased it.
In his 9 minutes, whatever.
Yep. But ultimately, like McCabe serves such an important, like multifaceted function for this team. They can't afford to lose him. And I don't like that. The reason why I thought about him with Muzzin was the injury this time, where I was like, damn, that would remind me of it, where it's like you get closer to the postseason and you have a guy who is getting a little bit older and plays that style where it's like he's not afraid to engage you physically, not afraid to get into a fight. The body starts to wear down. And so, for McCabe's sake and for the organization's sake, again, I feel like I'm speaking on both sides of my mouth because I love the fact that he plays so fearless. They're going to have to preach it to him in a way that isn't fear, but more responsibility and import to the team moving forward, and kind of have him be like sort of on the no-no list for fighting, especially heavyweights. Like this is 2 fights against 2 of the better heavyweights in the league this season.
So I'll never forget, it was such a great line. Tyler Toffoli, after the bubble series that Montreal upset Toronto. And that's the one Tavares went out. He said in the Montreal room, they knew they had a great shot to win the series when Jake Muzzin went down. It wasn't about Tavares. It wasn't about, we have Carey Price. That series turned in Toffoli's mind and a lot of his teammates' mind when Muzzin went down. That's how important Muzzin was to the Leafs. And just drawing the parallel where you're talking about McCabe. Yeah. So
I think that
it's just a good thing it's in January. There's lots of time for him to hopefully get straight here. Yeah.
For sure. I'm not trying to like fearmonger and have people be like, oh, he's injured. Like that's not my point here. My point is simply that it's like you've had 2 head injuries in a season. If I'm the Leafs, I'm being like overly cautious in terms of his return, right? Like I'm just pushing this. The way that they treated Matthews is the way that I want them to treat McCabe, where it's like you're not stepping foot on the ice until you're cleared by, a doctor in Germany too. We want multiple opinions that you're ready to go. But yes, just simply that the messaging is, hey man, we love the way you play. We love the way you stick up for teammates. We don't want you to lose the snarl, but we can't have you fight the Hathaways and the Shens of the world. Like it just can't be a part of your game anymore. You're too important to this team. Like we'll let Simon Benoit handle that. I don't care who handles it. It flat out cannot be you. Okay, so speaking of the injuries, I gotta ask you about the Matthews stuff, which I don't even know what to expect from like an answer or where we're even really gonna go with this discussion. But it's just so wild to me that he goes, he misses games again after he takes the cross check against the Sabres, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So he takes the cross check against the Sabres. He misses some time. You guys get to speak with him. He mentions that I think that he said the cross-check didn't help things along the way, but also that he wasn't sure it was an injury that he was going to be able to get over during the season, but that then he comes back and he plays what I thought was one of his most complete and healthy-looking games of the season on a Saturday night. Shortly afterwards, doesn't look like fatigued or beat up or slow by any stretch of the imagination against Philly on a back-to-back. So I'm like, okay, I'm pretty encouraged by this. What is your read here? What is your understanding of this? How are we meant to project this moving forward? The timeline, all of this, because it's exhausting, it's confusing. It's a lot of different things.
My read is the player wants to play. He wants to play for the Leafs. He hates sitting back and just watching, and he wants to play in the Four Nations. Mm-hmm. And he's giving it as strong of a go as he can. He doesn't want to take days off or games off. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some maintenance days and he skips some practices, though, as they try to manage it. So he's indicated that rest helps whatever this ailment is. So Berube is, I think, going to limit his minutes a little bit, although, you're coaching in a one-goal game, and almost every Leafs game is a one-goal game these days. You get tempted, you throw him out 6-on-5, but Berube's going to try and limit his minutes a little bit more. I think they're going to take it a bit easy on practices, but Matthews wants to push through the pain here a little bit, the discomfort. And fans are probably going to be on the edge of their seat every time he takes a cross-check or a hard hit. But I am encouraged by what I saw this weekend. For sure.
I'm encouraged too.
I was surprised how good he looked. Yeah. I was a little surprised how good he looked.
Impossible not to be surprised. Again, he did the smart move, which was to set the bar low, talking about how he wasn't sure he'll get over the injury during the season, and then coming out and looking his absolute best, because we all had to basically recalibrate our expectations on the fly watching him in that game. It's just, this will still bother me, and whatever, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and if he's healthy enough throughout this stretch, then I guess it is what it is, and he goes and plays for the Four Nations. The thing you mentioned there, the second part where you go, and he really wants to play in the Four Nations. Yeah, everyone should, right? I want all players to want to play in the Four Nations. I want all players to have the drive to want to play for their country. But for an injury that does require rest, an injury that does need to be mitigated, an injury that might not heal over the course of a regular season, I just hope that none of the timeline has to do with having enough of a runway ahead of this tournament to justify the decision to go. Because that to me is actually the scary outcome if you're invested in the Leafs.
What if he plays every game from now up until the tournament?
I mean, you can't say no. I've put my stake in the ground on this. I think that if rest and recovery is going to have a real meaningful impact on him, which I think we can say conclusively it does, especially given the way they've handled it, but also the way that this whole thing even started, which was when the Leafs had their lull in the schedule, right? In November or December? No, it was November. Their lull in November where they had 3 games in 12 days or whatever. The big talking point was this is awesome because we can skip a few games for Matthews and he essentially ends up getting 2 weeks of rest without missing any games. It's hard for me to understand as if I'm just putting on Leaf fan shoes, it's hard for me to understand how the captain of the team would make the decision to go play for his country ahead of putting his team first, given the injury. If he gets hurt at that tournament, I've said it and I'll say it again, it will irreparably alter his perception in the city forever, and unless he wins the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, but it's an if. It's three. The tournament is 3 or 4 games.
Yep,
that's it. And this is a proud American, and there will be pressure from U.S. hockey and from Gary Bettman. He's one of the faces of this thing. Mm-hmm. So if he's healthy, he's playing. Or if he's healthy, if he's 80% healthy, whatever he is right now, he's playing.
Mm. Don't love it. I just can't. I just can't. And this has nothing to do with the Canadian thing. I would genuinely be saying the same thing if it was Mitch Marner. Like if it was Mitch Marner and this was the exact situation, I would be going, you cannot go, you cannot go, you cannot go. The only difference is that I genuinely believe there's an added emphasis to being the captain of the team, having just taken on this role this year and, showing your group, like, leading by example and saying, like, I'm not good to go. I know what the stakes are here, and they're far greater than winning the Four Nations tournament for the Americans. Like, I'll get them next year in the Olympics. Anyway, only a couple more for you. I want to ask you about Phillipe Myers. So he gets this contract extension. It's kind of a nothing burger in terms of risk, right? It's like $800K, same thing. Like, okay, 2 years of a guy who's a right shot D who's big. What is your understanding, though, of the internal view of this player?
They like him.
Yeah.
And the coach especially. So Treliving and Berube are aligned in that they love their defenseman big, right? So he's a big righty, whatever. He has the right attitude. That's the other thing. We talked about this guy, and he's like, he's just thrilled to be here. And it's usually a guy that gets healthy scratched and barely plays for the first 2 months of the season. You sense frustration from him, and that's not the case with him. So I think he has the right attitude to be 6, 7, 8, whatever it is. Pop in, pop out. And Berube's a big fan. And I think he loves the fact that he doesn't hesitate to shoot it. You know, he doesn't have a goal yet, but he plays the way Berube wants guys to play, which is a little bit physical and just simple. Like, you get the puck at the point, blast it, and hope for the best. And my sense from the player is he's been, he's turned into a bit of a journeyman, like fringe guy. The fact that there's actual term on this deal, he was thrilled. He's like, they're going to give me 2 years? Great. Even though it's less than $1 million. And it's very low risk. And injuries to defensemen happen all the time. So I think it's fine. It's fine. And it's going to look even better when the cap goes up. And even if he has to spend some time in the Marlies or up in the press box, it's not going to hurt you. I think it's fine. No,
I think it's fine. I wonder if they think he can be a Benoit, where there's like a little bit more than what are you trying to win on this contract, or are you looking at this contract as just simply, this is what he is. He's $800K player. And if we get that, that's all we really want out of this.
Yeah, and I think, it also keeps guys like Connor Timmins honest. Like, Connor Timmins had a nice stretch of hockey. He dipped a little. Someone's coming for his job. I think that's a really good thing to have on the edges of your lineup.
I agree.
You know what? Yeah.
I agree, but I also want to see it at the top of the lineup too sometimes. Like when William Nylander stays out for a 4-minute shift, you're like, hey, there's going to be some discussion about this. I love the accountability stuff, but there's a reason for the saying, and I believe in Australia, is like accountability sounds at the top. And so if the internal competitions and the accountability only comes at the bottom of the roster, I think you have no accountability at all. So at some point this year, I do hope we get one of those moments where it's like, hey, we're checking the big guys too.
There was a really small one. So, Nylander was playing PP1 and PP2.
Yeah, I know.
There's a couple games back, they made a switch and had he threw Marner out for the extra PP2, and they actually scored. So,
all it took was an entire season of Nylander never scoring on the second unit.
Yeah. He's in one of his funks, but he'll snap out of it.
Yeah, 7 games without a goal for Nylander. So, yeah.
Well, look at some of the centermen he had for some of those games, though.
Yeah.
Holmberg and Camp. I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, don't disrespect David Camp. Don't throw him in the mix with this Holmberg. I won't accept that. I won't have it. Luke, really appreciate your time as always, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care, JD. Thanks for having me on.